McKenna was 35 the morning she found herself staring at a piece of paper that would change everything. The house was still. Morning light spilled through the lace curtain over the sink, dust dancing in the sunbeams. The kettle had boiled dry. Her fingers were still wet from peeling yams, the water cooling slowly in the basin. And there it was, a note, folded, resting on the kitchen stool like it had been placed with care and shame all at once. "I can't do this anymore, I'm sorry." She blinked, read it again, then again. Maybe if she read it one more time, the words would shift. Rewrite themselves, become something else, something better. But they didn't. Her husband, Leakin, was gone. No final words, no slammed doors, not even a packed bag to explain the missing pieces of their life. Just that paper, 14 words. She sat down on the floor beside the sink, her knees pulling in toward her chest as her apron sagged over her legs. There was no sound but the old wall clock ticking above the door. Tick, tick, tick. It was always a little too loud, but this morning, it sounded like a warning, like time was shouting at her. They had been married for 7 years. 7 quiet years of family meetings, tests, prayers, and too many whispered maybe next month conversations. McKenna remembered every date, every cycle, every bottle of folic acid, every awkward smile from well-meaning aunties who always started their sentences with, "God's time is the best." She wanted to believe it. She did. She had pictured it all, the baby's cot in the corner of their bedroom, the tiny socks she once bought and hid under a pillow, the songs she sang softly when no one else was home, the names she whispered under her breath when she thought no one was listening. But the child never came. And then neither did he. McKenna didn't scream. She didn't throw the note. She folded it again, pressed it against her chest, and sat there until the light in the kitchen faded into dusk. For weeks, she moved through the house like a shadow. She washed his clothes out of habit, set 2 spoons on the table, then quietly returned one to the drawer. She boiled his favorite rice dish, jollof with dry fish, only to stare at it, untouched, until the flies came. Grief made time melt and stretch. Some days rushed past like floodwaters, others dragged like a broken cart on a gravel road. Her mother called once, then again. But McKenna didn't pick up. What would she even say? That her husband vanished? That she was 35 and the dream of motherhood had been wiped away like chalk on a wetboard? The community whispered, "Of course. She's cursed. He stayed too long anyway. She should have tried IVF. She's too quiet for her own good." McKenna had always been the kind of woman who made herself small, polite, measured, never too loud, never too demanding, but even the most careful hearts break. And when they do, they break in silence. One evening, she found herself at her sewing machine. It had been weeks. The fabric, green Ankara with sunflower prints, had sat untouched beside her bed since before he left. A customer was waiting. McKenna didn't even remember accepting the order. She threaded the machine slowly. Her hands remembered the motion. Her mind, though. It was still curled up on the kitchen floor beside that note. As she pushed the fabric forward, the sound of the needle became steady, rhythmic, almost like breathing. For the first time in weeks, her fingers didn't feel heavy. By midnight, the dress was finished. Simple. Beautiful. A line with a high neck and a soft flare at the waist. The kind of dress she would have worn to church if her life hadn't just caved in. She stood in front of the mirror, holding it against her. The woman staring back looked thinner, eyes dull, lips chapped. But somewhere inside that reflection was the same McKenna who once believed in things. She folded the dress carefully, placed it in the brown paper bag, and then she cried. Not the quiet, hidden tears she'd let out in the bathroom or under her pillow. These were raw, shaking, ugly. She cried for the baby she never met, for the man who didn't say goodbye, for the version of herself she would never become. And when the tears stopped, something strange happened. She felt lighter. McKenna didn't wake up healed the next day. That's not how pain works. But she did rise. She fed her chickens, bathed, ate pap and bean cake, called her mother back. "I'm fine," she lied softly. The next Sunday, she went to church, sat in the back row, didn't sing, but she was there. Later that week, she returned to the community center where she volunteered. It was dusty, loud, full of crying toddlers and overworked workers, but it was something to do, a place to be, a reason to wake up and leave the house. That was where she saw them, 5 boys, sitting in a row, mismatched shirts, dusty knees, sullen faces, orphaned by a fire, rejected by every relative who could have taken them in. One social worker said it casually, like it was just paperwork. "They're a package deal nobody wants." McKenna blinked. The boys looked up. 5 pairs of tired eyes stared at her, curious, guarded, waiting. She didn't move. She didn't smile. But something inside her cracked open. McKenna didn't plan to become anyone's mother, not after everything she'd lost. But that night, after seeing the boys, she couldn't sleep. She lay on her thin mattress in the same bed she had shared with Lekan. The ceiling fan spun in slow circles, but her thoughts moved faster. Her mind replayed their faces again and again. 5 boys, 5 different silences. But somehow, they all looked like her. Not in skin or features, but in the way pain had wrapped around their hearts and made them smaller. She remembered how the youngest flinched when someone raised their voice, how the second eldest kept rubbing a threadbare cloth between his fingers, like it was a lifeline. They weren't loud. Not one of them spoke a word to her, but their eyes stayed with her. They followed her into her dreams. She woke before dawn, eyes burning, body tense. By noon, she was back at the center. She didn't know what she was doing. She only knew she needed to see them again, just to know they were real. "They're still here?" she asked the lead caregiver, trying to sound casual. "Of course," the woman replied. "No one's taken them. Too many mouths. Too many complications." McKenna nodded. Her heart ached. "What'll happen to them?" The woman shrugged. "They'll be split up, sent to different homes, maybe even different towns, or, God forbid, some will end up on the street." McKenna clenched her jaw. Something in her shifted. She didn't make a decision then, not out loud, but a seed was planted. The next week, she visited again. This time, she brought bananas. She didn't speak much, just sat in the corner and watched them eat. The eldest, Obi, tore his in half and gave the bigger piece to his brother beside him. McKenna noticed that. Kindness in scarcity. That meant something. She returned again and again, until they stopped staring at her like she was a stranger. And one day, the youngest, Jahi, fell asleep with his head resting against her leg. That was the beginning. Bringing Obi home was both bold and terrifying. McKenna stood in front of the government office, papers in hand, voice shaking. She wasn't rich. She had no husband, just a small business and a weathered house. "You sure you can handle this?" one official asked. "No," she replied, "but I'll try." She signed, and just like that, her life changed. Obi came with nothing but a small bag and a deep frown. He didn't speak for days. He cleaned his plate at every meal, slept lightly, woke early, always checking the window as if waiting for someone else to leave him too. McKenna gave him space. She didn't force hugs. She didn't pry. She just made his meals hot, folded his clothes, and reminded him every night, "You're safe." Weeks passed. One morning, she found his school uniform carefully ironed, the second button sewn back on. She hadn't done it. That was how Obi said thank you. Bringing Sefu was harder. He didn't smile. He didn't cry either. Just stared, always writing something on pieces of scrap paper. Numbers, maps, questions. McKenna asked what he was doing. trying to remember things, he mumbled. That was the first time he spoke to her. Then came Kazi and Zuberi, the twins, wild as wind, loud, hilarious. They turned her house into a battleground. Soap spilled in the bathroom, matches in the sugar tin, but also laughter, so much laughter. They made Jahi laugh for the first time. And then, the baby, Jahi. McKenna almost didn't bring him. She wasn't sure she could handle one more. But one night, she found herself standing over his cot at the center, watching him sleep with his thumb in his mouth. He looked smaller than she remembered, curled up like a question mark. She bent down, whispered, "Come home, little one." 5 boys, 1 woman. That tiny house groaned under the pressure. The bed frames creaked. The pantry emptied faster than she could restock. Shoes disappeared. Milk boiled over. And yet, somehow, they survived. McKenna learned quickly that love is not just softness. It's boundaries. It's morning arguments over who left the tap running. It's late-night fevers and school letters and spilled oil on the new wrapper. Some nights, she lay in bed wondering if she'd made a mistake, if she'd taken on too much. But then Jahi would crawl into her bed at midnight after a nightmare. Or Seifu would ask her to help him with his spelling. Or Obi would fix the latch on the back door without being asked. Every day they stitched themselves into her world. The village noticed. Some praised her. Others called her foolish. 5 boys? Alone? But McKenna kept her head down. She wasn't doing this for approval. She was doing it because love had knocked again, and this time she opened the door. By the end of the first year, their house looked different. The walls were scribbled on. The roof had a new patch, thanks to Obi and a borrowed ladder. The hallway smelled like soap and boys. Her kitchen became a classroom, a therapy room, and a prayer corner. She still missed the life she never got. But now, everywhere she looked, there were signs of a life she was building. 1 laugh, 1 shoe, 1 plate of rice at a time. The chaos that became home. McKenna never thought motherhood would feel like this. Loud, messy, and full of things she didn't understand. She used to imagine it in quiet colors, warm baths, folded baby clothes, and bedtime lullabies. But in real life, it sounded like clanging spoons, the hiss of oil hitting water, shouting voices, and sneakers thudding against her compound wall. 5 boys meant 5 moods, and every day brought something new. Obi, now in secondary school, became even more protective. He didn't just watch his brothers. He watched her. He noticed when she was too quiet, when she skipped lunch, when she rubbed her back in the evening after standing too long at the sewing table. "You okay?" he would ask in that low voice of his. She'd nod, smiling. But some nights, he left little notes on her door. "Don't forget to eat, Mama." Sifu still didn't talk much, but when he did, it mattered. He had questions about stars, about old war stories, and about money and how it worked. He fixed things around the house before she even noticed they were broken. He found a broken radio once, repaired it, and tuned it to gospel music. "Helps me think," he said, eyes on the window. McKenna stared at him, stunned. "You're 12, he shrugged. "And you're tired." She laughed, the first real laugh in days. The twins? A handful. Kazi and Zuberi were mischief wrapped in charm. They drew on walls, hid spoons under the bed, turned her fabric scraps into ninja masks. Every day with them was a gamble. But their laughter, it lit up everything. They made up dances, performed them during dinner, turned chores into races, and taught Jahi how to whistle with his fingers. And Jahi, still the baby, was growing fast. His cheeks were still pinchable, but his curiosity had no boundaries. He asked questions McKenna wasn't ready for. "Mama, why did our parents leave?" McKenna would pause, breathe, sit beside him. "They didn't leave, Jahi. They just couldn't stay." And he'd nod, like that made sense, like love didn't always get to stay forever. The days blurred. Morning prayers, uniforms half-buttoned, boiled eggs, lost sandals, the rush to school, the hush when they came home hungry and sunburnt. Evenings filled with homework, mended shoes, missing pencils, and burnt okra soup. McKenna worked more hours. Her hands ached from stitching late into the night. But every time she heard one of the boys shout, "Mama!" from another room, it stitched something stronger inside her, a different kind of strength, one born from fire. There were hard days, too, days she snapped, days she cried quietly in the bathroom, hands gripping the sink, days when the money ran out before the food did, when the landlord came, when one of the twins got suspended for fighting, when Jahi had a fever that wouldn't break. She'd kneel beside her bed and whisper, "God, I don't know how to do this, but please, help me not to fail them." And somehow, miraculously, there was always just enough. A neighbor would bring extra maize. A friend would pay early for a dress. A stranger at church would hand her an envelope with no name, just the words, "For your children." And there were moments, tiny golden ones that no one else would ever see. Moments that made it all worth it. Like when Sefu hugged her for the first time, unprompted, after she helped him fix a school project. Or when Obi stood in front of her and said, "Thank you, Mama, for choosing us." Or when the twins gave her a handmade card that simply read, "You are our real." Or when Jahi, during a stormy night, climbed into her bed, wrapped his arms around her and whispered, "I prayed for you." McKenna closed her eyes that night and held him close. "I think I prayed for you too," she whispered. The village began to change how they spoke about her. Some still whispered, but many began to admire. McKenna has done what many could not. Look how well those boys carry themselves. They don't have her blood, but they have her love. The market women called her Mama of Many. At church, life was still hard, but it was full. The house stayed noisy. Dishes always piled up. Socks were still missing. But the emptiness that once echoed in every room was gone. In its place, purpose, joy, and a little chaos she wouldn't trade for anything. McKenna, who once believed her motherhood had been stolen, was now raising 5 hearts that called her home. Time moved like it always does, quietly at first, then all at once. McKenna watched the years pass in school uniforms getting too short, pencil boxes turning into laptops, and questions about cartoons replaced by conversations about careers, college, and identity. Her little house, once a noisy battlefield of spilled juice and missing socks, slowly quieted. One by one, her boys became men. Obi left first. He'd been the most stable, the one who always stood just behind her at family gatherings, silently watching her back. When he received a scholarship to study civil engineering at a top university in Lagos, he hesitated. "I don't want to leave you, Mama," he said, his eyes serious. McKenna placed her hand on his shoulder. "You're not leaving me. You're extending me." He didn't understand at first, but years later he would. Obi flourished, both in studies and in spirit. He led projects, organized fundraisers, became the kind of man who made spaces feel safe. When he came home for holidays, he brought books, ideas, thoughtful gifts. Seifu left quietly. Always the quiet one, he didn't say goodbye with words. He left a note on her dresser. "Thank you for seeing me when no one else did." He started a tech blog in 2 local languages, creating simple tutorials for young learners who didn't have access to formal training. His ideas spread. Teachers began using his content. Sponsors reached out. One day, his face appeared on a flyer for a youth innovation summit in Nairobi. McKenna cried when she saw it. "He's changing lives," she whispered to herself. The twins went together, of course. Kazi and Zuberi launched a small clothing line from their bedroom. It started with sewing scraps into custom vests for local weddings. Then came social media. Their wild energy and eye for design caught attention. They didn't just sell clothes, they sold culture. Ankara with an edge, Kente with confidence. Soon they had celebrity clients, photo shoots, a studio in Accra, international orders. But no matter how big they got, they never stopped calling her every Sunday. Guess who spilled dye on the fabric again? Guess who forgot to invoice the client? Guess who still can't iron to save his life? And Makina would laugh until her sides ached. Jahi, her baby, stayed the longest. His voice bloomed before anything else did. By age 12, he sang at community events. By 16, he was invited to Lagos to record. His music was filled with sorrow, joy, and something else, a longing for home. Audiences felt it. At 19, he released a song that carried her name in the chorus. It wasn't about her exactly, but it was all her. The strength, the quiet, the sacrifice, the grace. It went viral. He didn't tell her he wrote it. He just called one night and said, "Check your phone, mama." She did. And for 10 minutes she wept while listening to the melody she had somehow helped compose with nothing but her heart. Her boys were men now. And yet, they always came home. Holidays, birthdays, losses, victories. The little house was still their anchor, its paint faded, the roof patchy, the floor creaking with each memory it held. Makena never complained. She swept, cooked, prepared the same jollof and tilapia they loved. The walls were filled with framed certificates, music posters, and a photo of all 5 of them as boys on the front porch. That photo was yellowed now. The edges are curly, but she kept it right above the sewing machine. She didn't want recognition. She didn't dream of big rewards. But deep down, she dreamed of one thing: a better home. Not for pride, for peace. A place where she wouldn't have to place buckets under the leaking roof. A space where she could walk without hearing the floor whine beneath her tired steps. Still, she said nothing. Then came her 60th birthday. It started like any other, until the smell of fresh bread and brewed coffee drifted from the kitchen, until she heard laughter, the kind of laughter that fills a house and makes it feel whole. They were all there. Obi, Sefu, the twins, Jahi. They cooked, they danced, they teased each other. It was like time rewound and brought her babies back to her. Only now, they were taller, wiser, broader-shouldered, but the same boys who once cried over broken toys and unfair punishments. She watched them from her bench outside, her arms folded, heart full. Then Obi stepped forward, holding something wrapped in soft white cloth. "Mama," he said gently, "we have something for you." Makena blinked. "What is this?" The others gathered around. Jahi grinned. The twins couldn't stop bouncing. Inside the cloth was a large silver key tied to a red ribbon. Before she could ask again, Sefu nodded toward the gate. Outside, a van was parked. Inside the van, photos, glossy prints, a new home, white walls, a wide kitchen, a peaceful garden, windows that invited the sun. "We built this," said Jahi, kneeling beside her. "For you, for us, for all you gave." Makena couldn't breathe for a moment. Her hand clutched her chest like her heart was trying to run ahead of her. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. Obi smiled. "You don't have to say anything. Just know, we remember everything. Every hug, every scolding, every unpaid school fee, every bedtime prayer, every time she gave when there was nothing left to give. They helped her stand, guided her to the van, drove her through familiar roads, and as she looked back at the house that raised 6 people, she felt no sadness, only gratitude. That little house was made of struggle. The new one, it was built from love. Weeks after she moved into the new house, Makena found herself waking up differently. For years, her mornings began with worry, school fees, breakfast pots, broken shoes. But now, silence. stillness. The light came in through wide windows. The floor didn't creak under her feet. And the scent of roses, real ones, drifted in from the garden outside. At first, she didn't know what to do with it all. The kitchen was too clean, the pantry too full, the bed too soft. She would reach for her sewing basket, then pause, realizing she didn't have to work today, or tomorrow, or the day after. Her boys had taken care of that too. A week after the move, Henry sat beside her on the porch as the sky turned gold. The sun rested on the edge of the earth like it didn't want to leave either. "Mama," he said, voice calm, "we want to give you something else." She raised an eyebrow. "What more could I possibly need?" He smiled, but didn't answer. Moments later, Seifu stepped outside, holding a thick brown folder in his hands. The others followed, quiet, gentle, beaming with that same glow they had the day they came home for her birthday. They handed her the folder. McKenna opened it, her hands trembling. Inside, documents, real ones, stamped, signed, a trust, set up in her name, funded by all 5 sons, enough for her to never want again. Medical care, travel, a small business if she wanted to start one. Property, retirement, peace. She couldn't speak. Her eyes burned. Her breath caught. "You did this? For me?" she whispered. They nodded. "You gave us life when we had none," Obi said. "Now it's our turn to make sure you live well," McKenna cried. But these weren't the tears she cried in bathrooms or under cold sheets. These were full, honest, holy. She never got the life she prayed for. But standing there, holding that folder, surrounded by 5 grown men who once walked into her life with nothing but need, she knew she had been given something better. And then, something unexpected happened. Months later, each of her sons, one by one, began talking about marriage, but not in isolation, not quietly or privately. They came to her, together, with a plan that stunned her. "We want to marry on the same day," Kazi said. "In one celebration," Zuberi added. "Not just for us," Seifu said, "but for you." McKenna blinked. "What do you mean for me?" Obi leaned in. "Because this isn't just about love. It's about the woman who showed us what love really is." The wedding was unlike anything the region had ever seen. 5 grooms, 5 brides, one radiant sunlit afternoon. The village buzzed for weeks. Tailors sewed through the night. Market women spoke of nothing else. Even the church choir added new songs for the occasion. On the big day, drums echoed across the fields. Trumpets sang. The air smelled of rosewater and roasted yam. McKenna arrived last. She wore royal blue, her jewel perfectly tied. Gold bangles lined her arms. The moment she stepped into the compound, the crowd turned, and then they rose. The master of ceremony didn't start with introductions or processions. He cleared his throat, looked out over the guests. "Before we celebrate these 5 men," he said, voice steady, "let's honor the woman who raised them, alone, strong, with nothing but a soft voice and a steel heart." Applause thundered. McKenna froze. She wasn't used to attention. She never asked for it. But here it was, raw and roaring. Strangers calling her queen, elders bowing their heads, women whispering, "That's her." McKenna, who once feared being forgotten, was now unforgettable. After the wedding, her story spread like dry season fire. Photos filled newspapers. Videos went viral. People whispered in awe. A mother of kings, an example of grace. She raised 5 legends. Organizations reached. She didn't need the world to applaud. Her reward had always been their lives, their return, their voices calling her mama, even when the world gave her no such title. Sundays became sacred again, her home, filled once more, with wives, with grandchildren, with laughter so loud it shook the walls and made her heart dance. There were juice spills, toy cars under tables, sticky fingers grabbing a cara from the plate before grace was said. And there, in the center of it all, sat Makina, her back straighter, her eyes softer, her laugh louder. Her grandchildren called her Mama Makina. The neighbors, they still called her Mother of Kings. And Makina, she called herself Grateful. Her legacy wasn't built from blood, it was built from choice. She didn't carry them in her womb. She carried them in her arms. She carried them through storms. She carried them in her prayers when they failed, and in her joy when they rose. She carried them all the way to their destinies. Makina's story is a reminder. Family isn't always born. Sometimes it's chosen. Sometimes it knocks, unexpected and wild, on your door, and you open it anyway. Love doesn't ask for the perfect moment. It shows up messy, complicated, and real. And when we give it, fully, freely, it has a way of returning to us in the most beautiful, breathtaking forms.
If this story touched you even a little, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps more people find stories that matter. And if you want more real, heartfelt stories like this one, subscribe to the channel. It's free, and it means a lot. Share this video with someone who might need a little hope today. You never know who you might help just by clicking that button. And if you've got thoughts, feelings, or even your own story, drop it in the comments. I'm always reading, always listening. Thanks for being here. See you in the next one.